Michelle, welcome. It's great to have you on the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You have created quite a stir today with your piece, The Zombie Claim About Navy Ship Numbers Returns to the 2016 Campaign Trail. I was talking about it last hour with Governor Pataki. He and a bunch of other Republicans just simply reject your three Pinocchios. So would you please explain to the audience what is the zombie nature of the claim that Republicans are making about naval strength?
Sure. So this was a claim that Romney had said during the last presidential campaign. And so when it came back up, I was looking back at the analyses that had been done and sort of revisiting that leading up to the 2016 cycle. So a lot of the criticism back then was that, instead of comparing the sheer number of ships 100 years ago to now, there are other ways to try to make the argument that Romney was trying to make. And so I was getting at that, and, I revisited the issue and remained consistent with the rating that we had given Romney then with the three Pinocchios.
Now, why do you call it a zombie claim? Because every naval expert I've talked to believes we're in a crisis when it comes to ship count and strategic ability to project force. Every single one. And as I read your piece, I didn't actually find anyone disagreeing with Lindsey Graham or Scott Walker.
Well, the zombie claim is sort of a reader-friendly way to describe that this is something that had been talked about in the past and that it had been challenged in the past as well. And, we sort of use it to say, hey, we've been there before, we'll say it again. So that's sort of a reader-friendly way to put it that way. I don't think it's that people disagree necessarily with the claim that there needs to be more ships or that the current fleet is not sufficient compared to what the combatant commanders say they need. But it's, again, going back to the idea that, the needs of the need and capability of ships evolve over time. So to compare the number of ships in 2015 versus a number of ships in 1915, 16, 17, or in the 1980s is just not an apples-to-apples comparison.
Now, I'm going to disagree with you. I want to be respectful here, but I was around in 1980, and when President Reagan campaigned for a 600-ship Navy, he was saying we need a much larger Navy to meet a strategic challenge. When you quote Lindsey Graham and Scott Walker today, and George Pataki said to me last hour, they're saying we've given away strategic advantage. So I think it is apples to apples. And I'd go specifically to, for example, are you familiar with the Ohio-class submarine, Michelle?
Mm-hmm.
And so do you know how many we had when Ronald Reagan took over?
I don't know the exact figure.
0, zip. He invented them. And so he deployed 24 of them. Now they're all going to age out by 2025,
right.
2030. So isn't that the same kind of strategic challenge? We didn't have a modern strategic ballistic missile submarine, and we're going to not have another one again in 15 years. So these candidates are actually saying apples to apples, we need a strategic submarine, and we aren't going to have one?
Well, right, okay. Going back to those submarines and the retiring and the decommissioning of them, there is that happening right now because the lifespan of some of these ships are about 20 to 30 years. So we have more ships being decommissioned than are being built. And, that's something that all the experts that I've talked to have agreed and said, it's going to be really difficult to try to rebuild to that levels as then because that's just not the way it is now. And the strategic challenges, I think that's an important point to raise. And I think there are ways to point to that without saying, hey, we need the 600 ships that we had back then, or look at how many we have compared to the 600 ships we had.
But Michelle, if I can pause for a moment. Has anyone said we need 600 ships? Because I haven't heard. I've interviewed every Republican candidate. None of them have said anything remotely like that. They all want like 250 to 260 ships. They haven't said 600. They were talking about the 600-ship Navy as emblematic of strategic need not being met. So I actually think it's apples to apples. But am I wrong? Did anyone say we need 600 ships?
I actually did talk to someone who said that they would love to see 600 ships.
Who said that? A candidate?
No, it wasn't. It was one of the experts that I had interviewed for the fact check. Okay. And, I understand the emblematic aspect of this. I get that. That it's a shorthand way to say that, look at the levels we had back then, look at the levels we have now. It just, it's much lower. And if you look at the numbers, yes, it is. And I think most people agree that, I think you had said about 250, but I think the number that people are using now is about 346.
Yeah, I misspoke.
So.
We would like to be at 350. We're at 273. Sure. Yeah, I misspoke.
Right, which is fine if that's the way that the issue is portrayed. That would be pointing at a specific number that the combatant commanders themselves have said.
But
so,
that's what the candidates actually did, though. I mean, I read Lindsey Graham's and Scott Walker's comments, and Scott Walker specifically said, look, we're at 275, 280. That's less than half of where we were under Reagan. You look at other components out there, there's some real challenges for us. I don't know how that gets through. I think it's a misservice to the public to say 3 Pinocchios when, in fact, they're pointing to a strategic deficit every bit as real in 2015 as it was in 1979.
Well, I don't think we're going to come to an agreement here, but again, the point that we were trying to make is that, yes, you can make the comparison to the levels that they were in 1980s, but that's not a direct comparison, right? But is there a need for a 600-ship Navy right now? And that is something that you can talk about or not, but it's just,
But it is a direct comparison because right now we're spending less than 3% GDP on our military. Reagan spent 6% of GDP on military. So there's this huge missile gap, this strategic gap, and missile gap is shorthand for what Kennedy ran on. Let me ask you, Michelle, have you read Robert Kaplan's Asia's Cauldron?
No.
It goes deep into the PRC's new naval technology, the new challenges of shore-to-ship missiles, all these different things. But the number of ship bottoms simply can't go below what the Quadrennial Defense Report has. And I think you noted in your article, we need to be at least 323. So just explain to me how you can recognize that we have a strategic deficit. We need at least 323 ships. We're at 273 ships, and then slam Republicans who call for a bigger Navy.
Well, I think there are two different things that you're getting at there. To say that we are below what the QDR, based on the analysis of the QDR, what that recommended, and then, as you said, slamming Republicans. The point that I was trying to make, and I'm trying to make now, is that, if you're trying to make the point that it's below the recommended levels, just say that. No need to say, what the level is now compared to what it was in 1915, or what the level is now compared to what it was in the 1980s. I think you can still make the same point using what the panel's review.
But isn't that what my point is? That's an editorial judgment. That's a political opinion. You and I disagree. That's not a fact, because I think we should use the 600-ship Navy, because that was Reagan's way of saying strategic deficit. The ocean hasn't gotten smaller, Michelle. We need a lot of ship bottoms out there. Maybe we don't need 600, but we need a whole lot more than we've got. We've got a strategic deficit. Now, you might disagree with me on that, but when you do fact-checking, my problem with this is you're asserting that they lied when you used Pinocchio, and they didn't lie. You just disagree, and perhaps they have a knowledge advantage over you, for example, as with regards to the Ohio-class submarines or aircraft carriers or ship bottoms. Is that not a legitimate point of view for me to have?
Well, I don't think this has anything to do with my personal point of view. That's not where I'm coming at this from. To a certain extent, when you give a Pinocchio rating, you're going to disagree. You and I are going to disagree. Other people and I will probably disagree, but you try to assess it on a consistent level using the same standards that you have done before, and that's all I did in this case. But no worries. If Hillary repeats a line that Obama used in the last campaign, we'll be consistent.
No, but that's not the point. Is if you were wrong 4 years ago, you're still wrong today. And to assert Pinocchios is to assert they're lying, isn't it?
That it's not the truth.
And it is. And what Walker and Graham said is the truth. So I just think you're editorializing under the guise of fact checking. And it's a strategic, this is very important stuff, right? Our naval strength is very important. Should the Post be editorializing as opposed to just putting it on the opinion page, which I wouldn't mind if you wanted to disagree and say, hey, we're not that small. That would be fine. But I mean, to argue Pinocchios, you're putting it in a different category, aren't you?
I don't think so. I don't agree with that. I'm not here to editorialize. I'm not trying to opine. I'm trying to do my job of putting these numbers into context, trying to shed extra information to put them into context, and that's what I aim to do.
I appreciate your coming on, Michelle Yeehee. Come back again. I love talking to Dan Balls and Philip Rucker, but this is a swing and a miss. I'd have to give you 4 Pinocchios on this story, but that would be my opinion, not a fact. Michelle Yeehee, thank you. I'll be right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.